Okay, welcome to another edition of the Trustcast Show, and I am really happy to have with us Scott Pappas. Is it Pappas or Pappas?
Pappas, yes, thank you.
Pappas. Okay, so today's guest helped build a law firm that exists entirely in something called the Metaverse, which we'll get into what that means in just a minute. But in under 18 months, Omnus Law landed one of the most prestigious rankings in the legal industry, the Chambers ranking, without a single square foot of office space. So, Scott, you spent 24 years in big law
I did.
and saw what the grind does to people. What was the breaking point that made you say, I'm going to help build something completely different?
Yeah, that's a great question. First off, Zane, thanks so much for having me on. I'm excited to have this conversation. So I did. I spent 24 years in big law, both as a practicing attorney and managing very, very large practices for some incredible law firms. But there was this recognition that we're at a place in time where lawyers want something a little different out of the practice and clients want something a little different out of their lawyers. And the legal industry was always historically the most resistant to change, the slowest to evolve. And we thought that there was a great opportunity here to really have some small impact on the experience lawyers have practicing law and the value proposition to their clients.
So, for someone who's never heard of Omnis, how would you describe it in 30 seconds to a
Sure.
lawyer who's burned out at a traditional firm? So, what's
Yeah.
your elevator pitch, really?
Sure. So Omnus Law is a full service corporate law firm that provides legal advice to institutional clients in corporate transactional matters, business and commercial litigation, as well as intellectual property matters. We're currently 45 lawyers practicing in 17 states. We've launched the UK, we're launching Paris, and we have opportunities in Europe and South America as well. For lawyers that are looking to have the resources that they've come to love in large institutional law firms, but they want a little more autonomy to their practice. This is a great law firm. What we do is we're very much a mission-based law firm, and everything we do is really focused around elevating that experience that attorneys have practicing. And that's really what I think has been a key motivator of the success that we've been able to enjoy.
So, I'm going to get into a bunch of quick, really direct questions too.
Sure.
I have a bunch written down, and I'm going to go through some of these,
Great.
but I'll probably veer off based upon our conversation. So when people hear metaverse law
Mhm.
firm,
Sure.
they're picturing a guy puts on the
Mhm.
glasses and cartoon avatars, and what does Omnisverse actually look like on a Monday morning?
Sure. So, Omnus Law is remote by design. I'll never identify us as a virtual law firm because a virtual law firm, I think, has a connotation of something less than a fully immersive, full service corporate law firm. But our lawyers are remote by design, and that is to provide them with the autonomy to practice as they see fit. But the challenge with remote environments is often attorneys tend to feel siloed and isolated in remote environments. I mean, teams are and you know, Zoom environments are great, but they're very transactional. You pop into a meeting, you pop out of a meeting. What a metaverse-based environment we call the Omniverse is designed to do is emulate the experience attorneys have in a traditional brick and mortar law office. It was designed by a human behaviorist, and it allows for a perpetual sense of presence. It allows for those bump-in interactions that a traditional remote environment lacks. So every attorney, every staff member, every member of Omnis gets an office in the metaverse. It is incredibly intuitive, and every aspect of our campus is designed to facilitate collaboration. And as I'm sitting here now, I have my avatar in my office. And, Zane, you and I are having a great conversation, but if you and I are having a meeting, the meeting's going to come to an end. And if we want to have a follow-up discussion, we'll have to get on each other's calendar. In the metaverse, I just walk my avatar to your office and we have a conversation the same way we would as if we were in a traditional brick and mortar. And it allows attorneys to collaborate. It allows attorneys to be top of mind. We have all of our practice group meetings, all of our attorney meetings, all of our social events, all of our leadership meetings. It all takes place in the metaverse. And it really is transformative. If you've never practiced in a metaverse based environment, and by the way, no VR goggles. You can certainly use them, but none of us do. But it really is designed to facilitate a level of connectivity that traditional remote environments tend to lack.
So, give me an example. So, let's say I have a specialty, and I imagine that I have a specialty in law that
Sure.
and someone else also has that same specialty, and this would be where I would think collaboration would be greatest, or something very close to it, and they think, I want to take this approach here, but I'm not really sure. I want somebody else. I want to talk to another person who has maybe a different perspective or has it. So how would you is how does that take place so that I want to go talk to Jim across the hallway in a typical law office, and I need to look in, Jim's door. Is he in? Is he busy? Is he whatever? And if he's not, then I get, hey, Jim, you got a second? I really want to bounce this off of you. And so that's what you're trying to replicate with your process. Is that accurate?
That's absolutely accurate. It doesn't replace human connection. So you still have phone and email and messaging that allows you to reach out to Jim and say, hey, Jim, you got a second? I want to bounce something off you. With the alternative is that you can can do that in a practice group setting. You can collaborate with Jim in his office. You can go into his office and have a whiteboarding session. You can review documents together. It turns that notion on its head that you really have to have expensive square footage in a major metropolis area to really facilitate the great practice of law. And you don't. The pandemic showed us that. So this really does allow everyone to connect in the same way you would in a traditional brick and mortar. But you're absolutely right. You walk the avatar, if I have a question, I have the controller right next to my office. If I have a question, I'll walk my avatar right into her office, see if she's there. If she's available to have a call, she'll get a little ping in her ear to let her know that I just entered her office. We'll have a conversation in real time. We'll complete our conversation, and I'll leave her office and teleport to my next meeting or walk to the next meeting. And in the process, bump into 4, 5, 6, 10 people that I may not have a meeting with. We could talk about how their children are and how they're dealing with the snow in the Northeast, where I am. And it allows that connectivity that remote environments tend to miss.
So if a cynic would say, that sounds like foo-foo. I mean, it sounds like some new age thing. So how do you answer? So why can't I do that with a Zoom and how do you answer that?
You can, but it's difficult to create culture over Zoom. And when you're thinking about what culture in a law firm really embodies, it involves a level of connection that just Zoom doesn't support. When Jason Guessing is the other co-founder of Omnus Law, and he has a wonderful, really successful background, and this was really his vision that we've come to execute. But when Jason and I were kind of road mapping the mission behind Omnus Law, we just didn't want to be another big law firm. We wanted to be a little bit of a differentiator. We really didn't want to kind of focus on the success of a lawyer. We really wanted to focus on fulfillment. And that was the fulfillment that attorneys have practicing law. And the difference between success and fulfillment is culture. And that's a very difficult thing to achieve in transactional environments. You need something to bridge the gap. Now, if you've never practiced and I get this all the time, if you've never practiced in a metaverse-based environment, it's hard to envision it. But I will say this to those cynics out there. Once you do experience that level of connectivity while enjoying the autonomy that you enjoy in your day-to-day practice, you don't go back. I've been in metaverse-based environments for the better part of 8, 9 years, and they are transformative because they do a few things. They allow us to run a very, very efficient law firm. Brick and mortar costs are on an escalator in law firms, but we can offer a compensation structure that candidly big law just can't touch because we can run a very efficient organization. We run a shared services model. When I was in big law, we had a full staff in every location where we had an office. So now we can run a shared services model that really allows us to have a great core group of professionals that service all of our lawyers regardless of geography. There are no accessibility limitations. There are no geographic limitations. There's a zero carbon footprint, and our platform has received the support and the endorsement of a number of state attorneys general because our platform affords greater access to justice. You don't have to be tied to a major metropolis to get access to quality legal services. So when you think about the experience, it goes just beyond, the nuts and bolts of everyday practice. There's something a little larger here, which we're trying to really advocate for.
So what's the breadth of your practice?
So the law firm represents really kind of every clients from the startup stage. We have a wonderful multidisciplinary practice that supports emerging companies and startups called the Omnus Venture Circle, and it really is designed to align quite closely with entrepreneurs at the earliest stages of their ideation, whether it's forming their business or protecting their intellectual property or preparing them for a seed or a series raise as they need capital. And then our relationship grows as they grow. But we've also represented larger institutional clients that have needs across disciplines. We have a white collar criminal practice. We have very tech forward practices. So when you think about the practices that Omnus has, you can think of those institutional practices that that really kind of focus in those three main pillars that I mentioned: IP, corporate, and transactional, litigation and transactional.
Yeah. So if you have an IP, or you talk about white collar criminal practice, those are generally location based, right? How do you manage that? So is it an advantage to have? So I mean, I'm just thinking to myself, if I was selling or if I hate to use the word selling, if I was speaking to a potential client,
Sure.
um, and you were explaining what makes your practice different than another practice that would help them with their white collar criminal law, what would you tell them?
Sure. So first off, our white collar criminal practice is chaired by a former assistant U.S. attorney based out of New York. So it's the right location for a white collar criminal practice. But what I think really differentiates Omnus from other large law firms is the value proposition that we offer to the clients. So typically, we have the same level of service, the same cachet when it comes to the quality of the lawyers that we have, and the same depth and breadth of experience, but our rates are a fraction of what big law charges. And what we're seeing is that between leveraging technology and having streamlined business operations, we can enhance that value proposition to the client. Additionally, we have internal practices which really allow us to partner with our clients to help them achieve their internal business goals. So law firms typically fall flat on the communication front. But we have institutional practices that allow our attorneys and really empower our attorneys to talk to their clients when there's a change in the scope of the engagement, or a change in the staffing of the engagement, or a change in the budget, or the changing of a timing of a deliverable well in advance of an invoice, which really allows, our clients to manage, their internal budgets in a way that really they find helpful. And so it's when you think about some of the most fundamental aspects of the practice of law, a lot of traditional law firms just fall flat. And we were able to leverage technology and innovation and just good business practices in a way that really helped propel our success. And look, that's how we got the Chambers ranking. So in law, there's a lot of pay to play ranking systems, and they're great. What differentiates Chambers, and Chambers really is the gold standard when it comes to ranking international law firms, is because it's not based just on the submissions of a law firm. It's based on the feedback of our clients. So our clients were the ones who advocated on behalf of Omnus because of the way we engage with our clients, the value proposition, the quality of the legal work that we, that we deliver. And so it's that external validation that we are best in class in our practices. And that's why it's never been a numbers game for us. We've had 3,000 applications of attorneys looking to join Omnus, and we're 45 lawyers. So we are selective when it comes to that.
So how did you manage it? So I said you gotten thousands of applications. That was my next question, from attorneys wanting to join. What are they running from?
So there are a couple different things. I think that there's this growing frustration in mid to large size law firms about I think the way their practice is managed. I think Big Law has a lot to offer in many respects, but I think there's this growing level of frustration that it's what have you done for me lately? Your existence is governed by numbers, and every January those numbers reset, and there are firm politics, and every partner subsidizes the decisions of a few, whether they're going to open up a new office or elevate salaries. And, when you think about your investment that you're making in your career, to have it subject to the whims of a few that may not necessarily align with your personal goals, there's a vulnerability there. And now with a firm like Omnus, there's another great opportunity where you're going to get paid more than Big Law, you're going to have the same resources, and you have greater autonomy. Now, from a small to mid-sized successful boutique, we have a great opportunity to bring them in, give them the benefit of our infrastructure, and now they scale with a national firm, an international firm. So there's a tremendous benefit there. It's not meant for everyone. And when we meet with lawyers, it's not an interview. It's asking a lawyer, Zane, what the next chapter of success looks like in their eyes, and whether it aligns with Omnus's growth strategy. And, that's really, and taking that approach, it's very different than a traditional Big Law interview. It's really just figuring out whether there's mutual alignment and benefit with an attorney joining Omnus. And when we're looking at Omnus or looking at attorneys, it's not just a numbers-based analysis on an attorney's practice. Certainly we want, attorneys with practices that align with our strategic growth areas. And we want attorneys that are productive. But we want great human beings. We want attorneys that be active participants in our culture. That is as, if not more important than the numbers behind the practice, because that's going to be sustainable. That's going to be, contributing to the growth in such a meaningful way. So, and that's why we're so selective. It's not an easy, feat to find the right combination. But when we do, it's wonderful. So.
How many attorneys are in your group now?
Well, the firm-wide is 45. So, and that's across all disciplines within the firm, and we're in growth mode. So it's not growth for growth's sake, but
so no billable hours requirements,
correct.
Real autonomy,
Yes.
Higher compensation. Mm-hmm. Tell me how. So I said no gotchas, but I got to ask you tougher questions, or otherwise I'm not. Otherwise, you're not telling the whole story to people who are either looking at working with you or working for you. Mm-hmm. So how is that sustainable?
Well, we bring on lawyers with track records of sustainable business development. So the lawyers that tend to thrive here have practices, are more established in their careers, and have the ability to generate client relationships. So we're not at the moment where we're really seeking, very junior lawyers, although we bring mm-hmm. in some lawyers that are more junior to support active practices. So, but, I'll tell you, traditional law is very inefficient. And when you take out a lot of those brick and mortar costs, the revolving art exhibits and, the $100,000 conference tables and the holiday parties that cost 7 figures, you realize that there's an opportunity to really reward the attorneys that we have for growing the organization, in a number of ways. And that's what our commitment was early on.
So Craig Hansen just brought his entire, let me make sure I got this right, brought his entire San Jose litigation boutique over to Omnus, which I think was a pretty big win.
Yeah.
What makes an established firm owner give up their own shingle to join you? Why would somebody, like that, really successful, do that?
Well, I think a lot of firms, Craig is incredible, and he is the national chair of our litigation practice. And I think he saw the pendulum swinging in terms of the opportunity in terms of in the practice law. And Craig and I just had, and Jason, we had a call. It was the Friday before last, and we were just reflecting on the onboarding process and how it's going. And he goes, since joining Omnus, he goes, I'm a happier lawyer. He goes, I don't have to deal with the administrative burdens. I focus on practicing law. I'm a better lawyer because I'm in a better headspace. And that was really exciting to hear because that's what we aim to deliver. For him, he developed a very successful practice, but now he has the opportunity to grow his practice beyond what he was capable of doing without investing significantly in the infrastructure of his law firm. Now, it was an absolute just win because not only is he a great lawyer with a great practice, but his firm values has the same values that we do. So there was alignment on all aspects. But he sees the value proposition. He sees the ability to just focus on serving your clients and scaling your practice and having an incredible team to really focus on the business of law. And that was really exciting to him. Plus, he has the opportunity to really put his fingerprint on what a national litigation practice looks like. So I think that was exciting to him as well. So.
Yeah. So what's the profile of a lawyer who you think will strive at Omnus versus one who you think, maybe not?
Sure. So a lawyer that has, I think, an entrepreneurial spirit, one who really wants to be collaborative with other lawyers, one who thrives on that knowledge sharing and the matter sharing. I think one that has a track record of developing client relationships that has a regional and national practice. They tend to thrive here because with our network of lawyers, they have the ability now to capture work that they may not have been capturing before. The lawyers that tend not to thrive tend to have really local practices. And the only reason why they don't is because scaling a local practice is a very bespoke endeavor. And when I'm thinking about real estate practices, family law practices, local municipal court practices, they rely on the phone ringing to sustain, their revenue. And it requires a different level of bespoke support that we're really not equipped to really handle. But for those institutional clients, those B2B clients, that's our sweet spot. B2C, only in select circumstances, typically white collar and some immigration and the like. So.
Okay. So from a client's perspective, what's the actual difference in their experience working with Omnus versus, traditional big law?
I think that's a great question. So, I never like to sell on price because I think that there's a value proposition here. But
Right.
one, if you put our invoices next to those in a traditional big law, you're going to get the same quality of work at a fraction of the cost. And that's really appealing nowadays because legal expenses tend to be a significant line item on their balance sheet. Now, but putting aside cost, we partner with our clients in a way that I think goes well beyond the legal work. It could be supporting pro bono endeavors. It could be understanding their business in a way that really allows us to not only do the legal work, but to do so in a way that really complements their internal business goals. And look, we leverage AI in a way that enhances the value proposition. We're not padding every bill with 10 associates that are taking notes on a matter at $1,500 or $1,800 an hour. There comes a point when it's just beyond excessive. And for what? Now you can come to an organization like Omnus, which has been our driver, and say, look, you're getting big law resources, big law expertise, big law support, but you're not paying those rates, and you're getting, a work product that's equal if not superior, and that has been, I think, our success story going in, and that's what our pitch is. And look, right now we're the new kids on the block, practicing for 2 years at Omnus, and we're going head to head with AmLaw 100 firms, and we're winning engagements, which is pretty exciting. I think just as attorneys are looking for something, I think that clients recognize that there's a fair amount of bloat in traditional law. And when we think about billing flexibility, when we think about that relationship that we have with our clients, there's a tremendous value proposition there. So.
Okay, here I got rapid fire questions. These are more fun. So
Okay.
really quick. Biggest misconception about the metaverse.
It's just for gaming.
One word to describe traditional big law culture.
Uh, Bloated.
I, I thought you were I thought you'd say bloat or bloated.
Mm.
What does your avatar look like in the Omniverse?
Pretty close to me. It has a little more gray hair, and it's a little thinner. But that's really what, but pretty much it looks like me. Glasses, beard.
Best advice you ever got from a mentor.
You follow your heart and the money will follow.
If you weren't in law, what would you be doing?
I've had healthcare startups in the autism space. And so I'd certainly be in the healthcare field advocating for those who have developmental disorders.
So, and what's your guilty pleasure?
I love riding motorcycles. So that's what
What
I do.
kind?
I Ducati. So,
Okay.
so sport
Fast
bikes.
ones.
I do. Yes, I do. It allows me to focus and maintain the moment. So,
Okay, so you founded Autism Behavior Wellness. So
yes.
I have a grandchild who's autistic, and so I'm well aware of that whole situation.
Mhm.
So you founded Autism Behavior Wellness after a 2008 Mental Health Parity Act.
That's right.
What was it about the moment that made you think I have to act on this?
So at the time, I was representing families because the Mental Health Parity Act required insurance companies to treat developmental disorders the same way they would treat physical ailments. And prior to that act, if someone had a broken arm, an insurance company would say, "Great, you're covered under your benefits, your in-network benefits until your broken arm is healed." But if you had depression, autism, another developmental disability, they would say, "Okay, you're in network for a certain period of time, and then you're out of network." So this was a bipartisan bill that required insurance companies to treat the two situations as the same. So it allowed me to advocate for some families who were really entitled to benefits. But when at the time I noticed that the services that these families were really advocating for were lacking. They weren't developmental in nature. They didn't have developmental benchmarks or milestones. And I thought that there was an opportunity to really enhance that experience. So I founded Autism Behavioral Services with a colleague of mine, and it took off. We reinvented it as Autism Behavioral Wellness about 2 or 3 years ago, that not only focused on traditional ABA health, but it really focused on wellness, and that was um, better nutritional repertoires, preventative health care, and really kind of creating a holistic experience for families so they can enjoy their time together. And we were in network providers for a number of big counties in New Jersey, and it really took off. But it was really impactful. I have another healthcare kind of startup that I'm flirting with in the back, but it's a population that really needs advocacy. And it's something that's near and dear to my heart. So that's how that came to be.
Okay. So one county in New Jersey offered you 200 children who needed services. How do you even begin to process that kind of demand?
It's very difficult because one of the challenges is finding those providers. When I say those providers, those BCBAs, board certified behavioral analysts, and those behavior therapists that really have the same perspective on treatment. A lot of these services were glorified babysitting services, and there needs to be something more evaluative there. And some private pay services were just churn and burn. They would just keep you in the system because they're expensive, and there's no other alternative. What I think drove our success with ABW was we approached it from a perspective of accessibility. So we really we were in network with 7 insurance companies. We were Medicaid approved. But it was a lot to manage. There was far more, and there remains far more demand than providers out there. And look, for us, just as the law firm isn't a numbers game, it was never a numbers game for us. We would only take the number of children we can effectively support. But it was challenging to find the right providers to really execute our vision, and that was a choke point for ABW.
So tell me exactly how an attorney would support a child with autism.
An attorney would support well, look, there's certainly special education advocacy. That wasn't my specialty. Really, I saw a vision, and I saw, and it's something I do with the entrepreneurs that I support in the law firms, is I saw an opportunity to really serve an under-supported community. And that's where this came from. Now, I'm not the attorney, I'm not the person providing the behavioral support. But what I am doing is creating the vision and the mission and surrounding myself with people who are really talented in that space, who could really be impactful. So, when we think about my role is very small. My role was the legal end of it and just going out there and advocating for services. But the real work that's done one on one with the child is far more important, is far more impactful, and it's done by others that we had the good fortune of working with. So,
So you mean, well, so I went to an auction recently for autistic children, and there were actually a lot of discussion about attorneys and just getting access to care required intervention on a almost like a routine basis. Is that what you're talking about?
it is. So, look, there are no, like, I shouldn't say this. New Jersey has a significant population of those with developmental disabilities, and sometimes it takes some advocacy to get those benefits and to get resources, whether it's at the state level or whether it's, in the municipal level, getting school benefits. And unfortunately, it's a very difficult and cumbersome process. So those people that advocate on behalf of those with those needs have a special place in my heart. We have a very big interest at the law firm of developing a special education practice, because there is a real need for this. But you're absolutely right. It's advocating for resources where they don't exist, advocating for funds that aren't being provided. Schools and public schools, they don't have the resources to really help these children develop in the way they really need to become successful adults. And that creates another pain point because many of these children age out of the system. And so when they're 18 or 21, what happens
Mm.
then? There are no resources. There are very, very few homes and facilities for adults with autism. And there's a need. I speak to a lot of parents who have children who are teenagers that are terrified of what's going to happen to their children as they get older and they pass. So there is, I mean, there's an opportunity to impact this community in a pretty significant way.
Um, so Omnus is expanding into Europe. What does international growth look like for a firm with no physical office?
Well, look, I think we're really opportunistic, and when we think about, when we built Omnus, when we envisioned Omnus, Jason and I spent a lot of time thinking about the architecture of and the infrastructure of Omnus before we onboarded Attorney One. We're not going to do that in Europe. So as we meet with law firms that have similar practices, that have the desire to become part of a national firm, we look opportunistically at that. But it's funny, we're not limited by geography anymore. We're not limited by bricks and mortar, and that's what's pretty exciting. And when you think about firms in Germany, and we have two attorneys at our firm that are dual licensed in UK, Wales, and the United States. One New York and one California. We have another one of our partners who's dual licensed in France, Paris, as well as New York. So we have entry points into those markets, and we have the ability to kind of look at attorneys who have similar practices that really want the same growth trajectory that Omnis has been experiencing, and it allows us to approach the market in really opportunistic fashion. So we'll see where that goes. I mean, I'd love to see us have outposts in Asia and in South America, but we vet those opportunities and quite closely to make sure that they really are aligned. It's not inexpensive, both in terms of capital and human capital to launch a new country. So we want to make sure that one, we're compliant with local law, but two, that there's a business case there. So, but we'll see. It's nice to think about,
So,
though.
yeah, 10 years from now, are traditional office-based law firms going to be the exception? Do you think that that's the case, or?
I don't. I think that I think you're going to see more and more alternative types of law firms being leveraged and normalized. I don't think that this is ever going to displace a traditional model, but it's going to really kind of. I don't think it's going to be the exception anymore. I do think you're going to see it's going to be just as common to see firms like Omnus and as traditional brick and mortar. And what I think you're going to see is that attorneys and law firms are really going to start abandoning their expensive brick and mortar offices because no one's going to them. Attorneys are going to them, but clients aren't leveraging them in the same way they used to. It's interesting. When I started out practicing 25 years ago, I was really excited about the prospect of joining a law firm, putting on a suit, sitting around a large conference table with my peers and talk about our cases like LA law style. But what's interesting is that lawyers don't aspire to have that experience anymore. We can do that in a lot of different ways. And it's very, I mean, it's being kind of embraced more regularly and with open arms, kind of more so than I think anyone would anticipate. But look, I think the proof is in Omnus, and we're not the only one out there. There are a number of other firms that have similar remote environments that are thriving as well. So, um, I do think it's an exciting time to kind of think about this.
So you just added seven. Did I get this? If I make sure I got this right, you added seven attorneys and two new practice chairs in one move. How do you maintain culture when you're scaling that aggressively? Because that is a danger. You grow so fast that you kind of lose your identity.
So Jason and I and our executive team met with Craig and his team quite a few times. We flew out to San Jose on a number of occasions. We met their entire team, and to not only just talk about the substance of the law, but to really just kind of connect as human beings. And that takes time. I mean, you know, this isn't when we bring on someone, it's not hey Zane, it's nice to meet you. Come on, join our firm. We want to make sure that there really is alignment there. And look, there have been instances where we've brought on attorneys and, culturally they weren't a fit. And, we had to have some active management of those folks. We're really fortunate that we were able to identify very early on that Craig and his team embodied those same characteristics that we do here at Omnis. So that made all the difference. And look, that's just kind of the start of it. We had so in January, we had 10 attorneys join us. So we
Oh,
had,
wow.
yeah, so we had Craig's 7 attorney firm. We had a 2 attorney intellectual property firm join us. The principal of that firm is now the newly named chair of our intellectual property practice. He took over from the prior chair, who did a wonderful job. Stephen Shape was wonderful, but Peter Weinstein has been named new chair of the IP practice. His partner is the chair of our life sciences practice. And then we brought on Kathy Fleming as the AUSA, who's chairing our white collar practice. So January was a great opportunity for us to really hit 2026 hard and really develop practices that we really think are going to give us a lot of excitement in 2026.
So if a lawyer's listening right now and thinking, this is too good to be true, what would you say to them?
So there's really, first of all, it's not. I think if an attorney is really excited about scaling their practice, if they have the ability to expand relationships, or if what we hear a lot is I'm a great corporate lawyer, but I have all these IP inquiries and I'm sending them out to a firm and I'm not getting anything from it. If you think about those opportunities that can be kept inside Omnis and monetized, if you're thinking about growing your practice and get excited about collaborating with others, then you should definitely reach out to me and we should have a conversation. Because what you find is that the traditional brick and mortar isn't the only route anymore in terms of practice. You could practice and have a very, very fulfilled life practicing if you're open to having a conversation.
Okay, I think we're going to wind it up there. So, where can people find you and learn about Omnus Law or reach out if they're interested in joining your law firm or becoming a client?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So certainly our website is omnislaw.com. You can certainly reach out to me at scottpappas at omnislaw.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. But if you have any questions or if you're interested in learning a little bit more about Omnis, I would absolutely welcome the conversation.
Great, Scott. Thanks for coming on. Hang on with me for just a second. I'm going to press the